I talk with people about a lot is what is this going to feel like and be in 5 years?
Hmm.
Whether they're going through a really difficult time or whether they're just struggling with trying to decide what to do with their life. So in some instances, people are like, well, I'm never going to be successful. I'm like, what does success look like to you? It looks different for all of us.
Yeah.
Like, and also, what does success look like? The word success, like in your head, you're picturing the car, or the boat, or the house, or the
Hmm.
thing. What does a successful lifetime look like?
Mm.
So, what are you aiming for? What are you working towards? Like,
Yeah.
unless you know kind of what that, what you want, you'll never get there because you'll just kind of wander around and take what comes. But if you have an idea of, oh, I think this is what I would feel really good, you'll start making choices that take you in that direction.
Yeah.
So that's the 5 years from now. That's when they're searching.
All right, what is up, Passion Seekers? I have someone here really special, USA Gymnastics, author, keynote speaker, corporate leader, Emmy Award-winning news anchor, Nina Sossman Pope. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, we were chatting a little bit off camera and talking a lot about a lot of things, really, and super excited where this is going to go. So I kind of want to hit on USA Gymnastics. That kind of started a lot of, would you say, what you're kind of experiencing now?
Yeah, well, I think it built, I ended up doing a lot of research and writing and speaking on resilience.
Yeah,
And I don't think I realized it back then, but when you're a gymnast, you literally fall down and get back up.
yeah,
And all day long, you're told what you're doing wrong and how to correct it. You're coached,
yeah,
very coachable. So that began this journey of one, taking direction and, recalculating where I needed to go
yeah,
all the time, and also falling down and getting back up and finding a path forward. So I think early on in gymnastics started that. And one of the biggest things was, so I was on the US gymnastics
yeah,
team back in the day in the 80s. And I was on the cover of magazines, like Olympic
yeah,
hopeful, like I'm a teenager and I'm walking down the halls of my school and everybody knows like watch Nina on ABC World of Sports this weekend. Like it's a thing.
yeah.
I'd moved away from home at 13. So
Wow.
it was my whole world. And then I didn't make the Olympics.
Mm,
After years of being on the US team and stuff, I didn't make the Olympics. I mean, only a handful of people make it, not the whole
yeah,
US team. So that was my first big failure. So I felt like a failure at the ripe old age of
yeah,
16. I was like, my life is over.
yeah. At 16, I can imagine.
Yeah, because I had spent my whole life doing that sport. So that was my first big failure. And throughout my life, I've had other big ones, when life didn't go as planned. And so I got to a point later in life where I look back and went, oh, there's a series of these big failures because you just introduced me with all my accolades.
Yeah.
But what I talk about is all my failures, all
Which
my screw ups and things
which
like
I
that.
love that because I think you got a lot of gurus out there. A lot of people they publicize their fame. Sometimes for the good
Mhm.
and sometimes not so much. And I think that is one of the biggest things that's missed is talking about those failures.
Mhm.
I have a saying, and it's actually a wallpaper on my phone. Failure is an acronym for first time at learning. It's one of the things that I had to tell myself a lot during when I thought I was a failure, but it was like, no, it's just prepping me for what's to come.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, the U.S. gymnast not making that at 16, I can imagine the detrimental feeling that you had during that,
Right.
like walking the halls as
Oh,
one
just the
moment.
shame of that high
Yeah.
school, like having to walk back. I remember driving back thinking, I got to walk the halls of my high school. And I bombed in a qualifying. It wasn't like I was like almost made it and didn't. I bombed in a
Wow.
qualifying in 84. And it was just there. It's not like it is now where now you have several
Yeah.
competitions and then they choose the people who've had the most, or the most consistent and
Yeah.
have the right skill level. Back then, either made it or you didn't. And I just bombed in going into a qualifying meet. And
Gosh.
so it was embarrassed. I was so full of
Mhm.
shame. It was just this horrible first big failure in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How'd you cope with that?
I had some good people around me.
Yeah.
I had coaches who helped me redirect, and I still had the opportunity to do a college scholarship. And so people, my parents and other people redirected me in that direction. I didn't do great with it. I'm sure I
Mhm.
made some poor choices and did some stupid things.
Don't
Um,
we all?
yeah, exactly. But after that, so I did go to college
Uh-huh.
on a gymnastics scholarship. I
Cool.
went to LSU,
Okay.
good D1 school. They won the national championship last year in gymnastics.
No way.
And so they're great gymnastics program even back then.
Wow.
And so I went there, but then um, along this story of resilience and reimagining our lives, I got down there, kind of found my tribe, my people, a lot of other
Yeah.
athletes, at the peak of their game. And then I blew out my knee my freshman year.
Wow.
So I have career-ending injury, not one I could come back from. And so I thought, now I lost my sport. So now I really felt like I didn't know who
Mm.
I was. Um,
Kind of misidentified. Like
yeah.
just kind of figuring that out.
Well, think about it. I mean, nowadays it's your Instagram and your
Yeah.
TikTok and everything. Like you identify as
Yeah.
the sport you do. Um, but back then it was like your bumper sticker and your sweatshirt,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
whole different vibe, but still is how you identify,
Yeah.
And so losing that just I didn't know who I was without gymnastics.
Hmm.
I'd been in the gym for so long. And then I made some real poor choices. I used to like take my Percocet with a shot of Jaeger and wheel myself down. I was in a wheelchair for a while, then
Yeah.
on crutches, like, and try to get to PT and just,
Wow.
I like to say I finished LSU. I graduated in booze and boys. So I had a lot of making up to do.
But like, I mean, that's a huge pivotal moment in your life.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, one, the U.S. gymnastics situation, not making that, and then also blowing out your knee. I mean, you see it with a lot of. I'm a huge football fan. So you see a lot with football players when they blow out their knee or have a career ending, and they
Mhm.
don't know who they are because
Right.
all they've ever been was this. So like, how'd you shift? Like, I mean, obviously you're going to go through some hard times, but obviously where you're at now with your accomplishments, you've obviously done some right
Right.
things.
I did some things right. And like I said, I didn't really look back and see what I did right till
Mhm.
later. But now I've mentored and helped so many young people through this, my
Yeah.
own kids included. My son had Tommy John. He
Wow.
was a baseball player. I was a gymnast at LSU, married a baseball player from LSU, had these super little athletic kids. Son was pitching, was a pitcher, had Tommy John surgery. He thought his life was over, and
Wow.
I knew the feeling.
Yeah.
One of the things that's really cool to look back at now. So if you are in one of those moments, or if you were parenting someone in one of those moments, I'm not sure what your whole audience is, but I do this. It's chapter 6 in my book. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Is this concept around timeline math? So think about this.
Oh, I'm interested.
So when you geek out with some math, and I'm not a math person, but geek out with some math with me for a minute.
Hmm.
So when I blew out my knee, I was 19.
Okay.
And at that point in my life, if you draw a timeline of your life, like take a piece of paper and turn it horizontal
Yeah.
and draw a line and put 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, like dots, 10 dots across it all the way
Yeah.
to 100. Like if I live to be 100, which I need to drink less wine and take better care of myself. But if I get there,
Truth.
yeah. So you can put a dot there. So on that big, messy, marvelous timeline of my life, when I was 19, gymnastics was all I had known.
Yeah.
Like I said, so I'd been in the gym since I was about 4. So if you do the math, at 19, those years, just that piece of that timeline, that was 85% of what I knew was in the gym.
Mm.
Okay. Well, 75 from 4 to 19.
Yeah.
So 75% of my life had been in the gym. So of course it felt like my life was over.
Hmm.
It was what my life experience had been. So it felt like everything was ruined. And
Yeah.
I didn't know life any differently. So of course it felt like life was over. Now, if I fast forward on that timeline to when I turned 50 and I had already had all those years in close to
Yeah.
15 years in television on TV and 12 years in tech with Benefit Focus, and 20 something years parenting kids at home, I can look when I turned 50 and my kids were leaving for college, then it was 28% of my life.
Wow.
It went from 75% of my life to 28% of my life. Is that little chunk of time. If you draw a chunk on that
Yeah.
map, on that timeline. And then if I play it forward and live to be 100, then it's 15%. It's a little piece of that. So you can take your life and put little parts, chunks of time in there and figure out how much of a percentage of my whole life is this?
Yeah.
What I call your big, messy, marvelous life, the whole timeline. And it's really cool to think about that way too, because from that point forward, like wherever you are in your timeline in your 20s, you can
Yeah.
put that dot there. Your whole timeline ahead is blank. Like all that blank space ahead to do
Yeah.
cool stuff. I edited this stuff there. I was really proud of myself. So you have all that time ahead to do cool stuff. And I can do that. I can put my dot in my 50s and go, look at all this. I got time ahead to do.
Yeah.
It's blank. Anything can go in there. So it helps you look at it that way. And I'm a big fan of the saying, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
It's just not okay to stay that way.
Yes.
So that was a tough chapter in my life.
Mhm.
You know, that those year or so when I lost the sport and had to find myself again. But what my whole life?
Yeah.
You just can't get stuck there.
Yeah, and I love that so much because one of the things like what I have an issue with at like 26, I want to, have this empire. Created this empire like I have
You got plenty
huge
of time.
goals and huge ambitions, and I always get in this heart, this headspace of like, oh, I'm 26 and I haven't accomplished enough. And I'm like, I have to bring myself to reality and almost be like, okay, well, think about my life from 26 to when I was born, or from when I was born to 26. Think about like what I've done, the things that I've experienced, the life things that I've been through, high school, college, all these things. And it's like, oh, I okay. And so I love that realization of it because I feel like, a lot of these gurus, we'll call them gurus out there that are social media influencers that are posting all this stuff, and it's making everybody feel like they need to be that.
Yeah.
And it's like, some people don't start their business until they're 50. Like we were talking in the podcast that you were on not too long ago.
Yeah.
Like that, it's never too late. And that's what I love about that. And, I also love how you say it's like, it's okay to not be okay,
Right.
but you have to be willing to fight and grow out of that to get to that aspect, which I love, which is kind of going to segue into kind of talk about you becoming an Emmy award-winning news anchor, which is totally different from being a U.S. gymnast.
Yeah.
So what type of mindset did you have to have from blowing out your knee, realizing that like, holy crap, my life is not going to look like what I expected it to being an Emmy award-winning news anchor?
So I got pretty fortunate. So when I first blew out my knee, you had to work for the university. You had to do something to keep your scholarship. So my coach was none too happy that I blew out my knee my freshman year as this big recruit she spent a lot of money on to get here. So I ended up working in the laundry room.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about washing like leotards. I was washing like jock straps, and I was,
God.
it was like football and basketball. I was in the PMAC, the Pete Maravich Assembly Center at LSU, and I would work in the laundry room. That was what I had to do. That's where I got put. So I'm working in the laundry room. I used to say my claim to fame almost got to be that I washed Shaquille O'Neal's jockstrap. That could have been it. We actually had some overlap. But
so close.
Yes. Anyway, so I was in the laundry room and like crutching around and doing my stuff. And then I would sit outside the laundry room and watch all the other athletes walk to practice and stuff.
Yeah.
Because it was right there in the central location where track and field and baseball and all the other sports were right there, and gymnastics. So I'd watch all the other athletes, and nobody came to talk to me because like I was example of what could happen, and I was not real friendly, like nice to be around. I mean, I was pretty grumpy. But you're kind of like you're the image of what could happen. People don't want to be jinxed and be around that, So I would come out of the laundry room and I'd lean up against the side of the PMAC in the sunshine in the afternoons while laundry was going. And one day, one of the athletic advisors, and they didn't have mental health people and stuff like they do now. This was just an academic advisor who happened to work with athletes. That we had two for all the athletes there. If you actually wanted to think about your academics, back then it wasn't. Yeah. So he stopped one day and he's like, "How you doing?" And I said something snarky, I'm sure, like, "Great, can't you tell?" But he hung out and he started making it a habit to stop by.
Yeah.
And then one day I actually started, talking with him, had a real conversation. And he's the one who said, "Well, what do you want to, what do you think you want to do?" And no one had ever asked me. No one had ever said, "What do you want to do after gymnastics?" I had never thought about it, ever. So he got me thinking about what I was good at and what I might do. And so that's when he said, "Why don't you work for sports information?" And instead of in the laundry room, "Why don't you work for sports information?" So I went down that road, and then I got a job at the local TV station, WBRZ, doing stories. I started out in sports, doing stories on the other athletes in the minor sports.
Oh, wow.
Track and field, swimming, diving, golf, tennis, women's basketball, like everything that was minor, not football and baseball.
Yeah.
But I knew all the athletes, so I could go and get these great interviews, and I would do the interviews and stuff, and then give it to the sports guy, and he would, produce it and put it on. So I started off that way, and I did sports for a while, and then I didn't love sports after a while. It was like they win, they lose, here's the score. And so then I got into politics for a while, and I became a political reporter and a general assignment reporter. And then I started looking around, and ended up, through the years, different TV stations, and ended up here in Charleston and became the news anchor here. So
Wow.
sort of a trial and error early on what piece of journalism I liked.
Yeah.
But as soon as I stepped in that newsroom, it was fast paced and it wasn't exactly coaching, but you step in, you do the story, and then it goes on that night and you start the next day fresh and you just keep getting better.
Yeah.
So I loved that. And so that became like a drug. I mean, I spent all my time in the newsroom
Yeah.
and loved being a journalist. And then when I became a news anchor, that was a whole different ball game, from reporting to anchoring, but I get tired of being poor. So, and the money's in anchoring.
Yeah.
So I got to the anchor job. I didn't think I'd end up there, but that's how I ended up.
Yeah, which is so cool because I think what I can tell from that story is how you leverage something from your past, which is gymnastics, to honestly benefit your new found path. So because of your relationship with the athletes,
Right.
which I think is so cool because I mean your big thing is change, how to deal with certain change when life doesn't go your way.
Right.
And I think that's a perfect example because you literally lived out what you've been saying is like you were okay not being okay. But when time came to the situation, you were able to recognize it and then leverage what you in that case lost for your own gain, which has led you to where you're at now. Which is kind of going to segue me into this whole real estate. So like, with my life, I've talked about it on the podcast before, but like with me being a realtor, even with business, there's so much change that goes on. Mm-hmm. The big change is like the whole NAR settlement. Everybody's freaking out about that. Everybody's like, taboo and all this stuff. And I'm like, I've tried to frame my life of just rolling with punches. And instead of taking punches, just roll with it. You get punched in the cheek, turn left. If you get punched in the other cheek, turn right. And, because eventually it just kind of forms your path. So let's talk about change and how to deal with that.
Yeah. So that is my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So what happened is I went from TV to tech.
Yeah.
Another big change.
Yeah.
And I had great success in tech and television. I was, yes, an Emmy award-winning news anchor, but I also went through a divorce. I got fired one time and nationwide budget cuts. They let me go.
Oh gosh.
So yeah. And so they went younger and blonder, as I always joke. So, I mean, it wasn't always easy, but I kept reinventing and moving forward and coming up with something new. And then I jumped into tech and had big success there. So people started asking me, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And it led me down this path of going, I don't know, I'm just wired that way. And then I started interviewing other people and doing some research and what do top athletes do and top entrepreneurs and companies who almost go under, companies like Lego who just evolved through the years, think wooden blocks to plastic blocks to video games to AR experiences. And they also have all the movies they did.
Yeah.
Their first movie made $640 million.
Holy
and they were going
crap.
bankrupt right before they did that movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So think about it. They came up with the partnerships with Star Wars. They're one of the ones that I'm just fascinated with how they've gone from wooden blocks to AR experiences. And they also just came out with this AI toolkit for
interesting.
schools. Yeah.
I'm going to have to read up on that.
They continue to evolve. They're pretty spectacular. So anyway, I did my homework and thought, what did I do? What do these other people do? And people who've gone through traumas or big losses, how they overcome them. And there were commonalities. So there are 4 things that I found. And so my framework is my own mashup of this, science, like neuroscience, behavioral science, and stoicism. So I'm a big Ryan Holiday fan and
interesting.
love stoicism. So, and Marcus Aurelius, I wear him on my wrist or around my neck at all times.
Love it.
So it was a mix of science and stoicism and my own mashup of experiences and interviews. And it's 4 parts. And I call it, this framework, because whatever you're going through, say you've been, the real estate change right now.
Yeah.
That's a big this for everybody. Like this sucks. This is to change. This is something you have to deal with. It's your own this.
Yeah.
That's why I use that word. My first book is This Is Not the End. So whatever your this is yours.
I love that.
And the idea with my framework is you take this and you go through 4 steps. It's TIPS.
Okay.
Okay. The T is for timeline. It's tips. Because people are always asking.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
so
acronyms.
Tips, yeah. So TIPS is my acronym. And so I put it in a timeline. And that is what I was sharing with before. You put on a timeline. Where does this thing that's taken up all the space in your head,
Mm-hmm.
you know, shrink it down to where it fits in your big, messy, marvelous life, like the whole giant timeline. It's not your whole life. It's a thing you're dealing with right now at this
Yeah.
moment. Shrink it down there and figure out where it fits in, and then isolate it. That's the I. Draw a line on both sides of it on that piece of paper. So you can't think about what happened before or after. You have to look at right at what you're dealing with in the moment, because any good therapist will tell you if you're spending all your time in like woulda, shoulda, coulda, the before,
Yeah.
that's where depression lives.
Yep. Yep.
And if you're spending any time in the what ifs and the doomsday scenarios, that's where anxiety lives.
Yeah.
So you have like this magical little now. So I isolate it on the timeline. So you can picture this on a piece of paper, timeline, isolate both sides of it. And then I draw a circle around it. And that's the P, it's people.
Okay.
And we touched on that, like pull in the right people. Who's in that circle with you.
Mm-hmm.
When something happens, you feel really alone.
Yeah.
But you can pull in some people that you might need in that space. And you also might need to take some out.
Yeah.
I do an exercise and I have people on their own, anonymously for themselves, take a piece of paper and list like who's helping, who's hurting in whatever you're going through right now.
So good.
And even people who love you can be hurting.
Yeah.
They can just, by constantly badgering or whatever, they're not helping the situation. So just with whatever you're dealing with, who's helping, who's hurting. So that's the people part. And then who's missing. Is it a therapist? Is it a mentor? Is it a podcast like this?
Yeah.
I mean, just by listening to this, you're already doing part of the P part.
Yeah.
You're pulling in other people's opinions. So that's the P part. And then the S in tips is story. So at the bottom of the page, I say, this is, and draw a line. Like what is, you have to name it. It's not ruined or off. It's a challenge. It's a something. You have to name it something, because we do a lot of the language in our head that comes out of our mouth becomes our story. So if this is the worst thing ever and it's ruined and you hate this job and you wish you hadn't gotten into it, that's the world you're living in.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the world you're living in. And if this is a new challenge and you got to find some smart people and figure out a path forward, because, you used to love this and you're going to find the love again. Like, that's the world you're living in.
Yeah.
So your thoughts become your reality. And that's the S part. It's that story. What's the narrative? Let's take control of the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The story that you're telling becomes your own story because you're living it.
Yeah.
And it also comes back to you. So if you're the guy who just got fired, okay, and you call back there, somebody calls you from the office. Picture you get fired.
Yeah.
Somebody calls from the office and they're like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, I can't believe they let me go. And so doesn't do any of his work. And good luck with that. And y'all are going to never make it without me. And like, that's this. And then you hang up the phone and the person looks around the office like, how's he doing? Like, he is not happy.
Yeah. Don't call him.
Yeah. Okay. Same phone call. Somebody from the office calls to check on you and they're like, how you doing? You go, I didn't see that coming. And obviously, I'm going to be looking because I still need a job. And you guys know how good I am at this. So put the feelers out for there. And good luck with you guys. Good luck to the rest of you.
Yeah.
It's the same scenario, but the people in that office now want to help that guy.
Yeah.
They want to help that guy. And that's, and you and your own mind are in a different place too. So it's creating your own reality.
Which I love that. I used to have a mentor of mine used to tell me when I was in college. So I went through a really dark time during college. And he used to always tell me two things. One, he'd always text me every single morning, what are 3 gratitudes? He was like, I don't care what they are. He was like, I don't care if it's just you opened up your eyes. He was like, I really don't care. Just tell me 3. Used to annoy the crap out of me. But the other was change your perspective. And never really understood that until I lost my job and felt like I lost absolutely everything.
Right.
And I wanted to blame the world. I wanted to do everything. And then that phrase came back in my head and says, change your perspective. I was like, okay, well, my perspective sucks.
Yeah.
And I was like,
life
wait,
sucks.
yeah.
And it's not fair.
And I was like, well, wait, like, no, like my perspective is now that I get to really lean in to real estate, what I really wanted to do before I took this job. So it was like, rather than it being a failed, situation, it was an opportunity to do what I really enjoyed. So then I was like, started seeing, life in a different light. And I talk a lot about this on the podcast, but it's the constrictive mind and the abundance mindset. And I was very like very, trying to, I call it limited belief. Like, oh, I'm only allowed to make this much money. Oh, I'm not going to be rich.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not, to a point like, no, money's in abundance. Like, they print money every single day. I just got to figure out what to do to make more, and then what makes me happy, and lean into that. So I love that it's, labeling it from, rather than a negative thing. It's like, okay, be upset. It's fine.
Yeah.
But let's flip this a little bit and figure it out.
Yeah, it's that self-talk and that self-sabotaging language. You're either helping or you're hurting yourself with what you're saying. And that's how the people around you respond to you. One of the things I always say is you're the main character in your story.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, you're the lead character. You're going to decide who else is in it with you, and the locations and the language. It's all you. Are you going to curse? Are you going to not curse? Are you going to do this? You're the main character.
Yeah.
And not your job, it's who you're being. But you are not the main character in anyone else's story. So, especially with its parents, I'm like, you are not the main character in their story, but you are a character. And how would they describe you?
Wow.
What are the words they would use? And your wife, you talk about what words would your wife use to describe you? Your coworkers out here, the people around you.
Wow.
Like, you're a character in everybody else's story. What are the words that they use to describe you? How do you show up? Yeah.
Wow, that's a humbling perspective.
Yes.
Because it's easy to think about like, oh, it's my own story. I'm in control of everything, yada yada. But wow.
I did it in a room of executives, and I phrased it a little differently. But it was about 50 CEOs and chief financial officers, CFOs and CEOs at a big conference. And they had a little special thing for all the executives. And I pulled them all in there, and I said, and I did that scenario, and I said, how would your, the other people in this room that describe you? And then I said, how would your team, let the rest of your leadership team describe you? Your investors, what words would they use? And then I went, or your spouse, and they all kind of scringed in their seats and giggled a little bit. I was like, yeah, it's scary, right? Like, we have to think about that. We're a character in everybody else's story. How we show up, that is on us, man.
Yeah, that's a great, I've never really thought about it in that context, because I've also always believed, like, the whole saying, you are who you hang around.
Oh, yeah.
That has been a huge influence in my life, but I've really started to take more action on that. And I think when we talk about your framework, when we talk about the people, like who you need to remove and who you need to add in, I think that's a huge, huge aspect. And I don't think people really give it enough weight that it's really needed. Because it's like, all right, if you're the main character in your story, but other people are also the character in your story, and you're also the character in their story, like, one, it's a reflection on you. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be someone that's invited in the inner circle or excluded? And then also thinking about like your personal inner circle. I think my biggest thing and is anyone negative Nancy. Negative Nancy's I don't have patience for, because there's so much more to life. And like, yes, there's a time and place.
Right.
And yes, it's okay to be okay. But it's like, if you're just going to be negative all the time just because you feel like the world sucks and you're not going to do anything about it,
right,
then I hope the best for you. But like, that takes energy out of me. And it's like, I love it in your perspective, because it's like, there's a time and a place to be negative, but having that open mind and abundance to say, I'm in control. And, if you're upset because you don't make enough money, well, let's figure out how to do it.
right. I used to tell my son when he played baseball, I was like, every day you step into that dugout, and you can do this, step into your office and your house. Every day you step into the dugout, are you adding energy? Or are you taking it away? Are you, do other people have to build you up and get you excited? Or are you the one building people up and getting excited? Like, what's your energy when you step into the dugout? Are you helping everybody, or are they having to help you? And you want to be that, we can't all be it all the time, but you want to be the person who's adding energy to the room. You want to be the person, that's who people want to be around. I mean, you want to be that guy, not the one everybody else having to build up your negative folks. Like, no one wants to be around that. You're allowed to be it every once in a while. We can all ask for help. Don't get me wrong. I've been there, and it's very hard for people like me to ask for help. Really suck at it.
Yeah, I have the hardest
Oh
time.
my God. So bad. So bad. I will, be on my last leg and someone will go, would you like me to help? And I'll still say no. They're
Yeah.
like,
Oh yeah.
this is the point where you say thank you.
Yeah.
And you just take it. Yeah. But it's okay that's the okay. It's not be okay.
Yeah.
Like we can't all be up all the time.
Mhm.
But for the most part, you want to be that person who is adding energy and not sucking the energy out of the room every time you step in.
Yeah. So, I mean, for someone that feels like they literally, I'm going to relate it to realtors, because I want to know. So, like the NAR change,
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of realtors. When I first heard about it, I was like, oh, this sucks. Literally, I just became a realtor. But I was like, also, well, no, here's the positive side. So I've talked to a lot of realtors, and a lot of people have a negative sense about it.
Yeah.
How do you mentally shift? Like, using your analysis, I think, is a great aspect, but let's talk about the application into the actual everyday life. How do you do the mental shift from being, oh, my life sucks, to, oh, this is a great opportunity?
So opportunities are, how we see things. That's a language piece, but just take this moment in time, make your timeline. How old are you? Where are you in your real estate career? Early on in it, late on in it, have been doing it for a while. And you can actually put a dot on the line of where you are and go, oh, this went into account here. So like for you've barely been doing this real estate thing, and now there's a change. It's one new thing you get to learn.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just a new part. It could have been like that 5 years ago. And then you'd have just learned it when you got in. It wouldn't have been a change. So but some people have been doing this for a long time. One of my best friends is a realtor, and she and I have talked a bunch about this.
Yeah.
Because it sucks,
It does.
It sucks, and it's changing her world. And I actually just helped my son buy his first house just
love it.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Not here, in Oklahoma City. He's in the Air Force. And we talked a little bit about how things were changing. So I get it, not as well as you do, but I get it to that point. So wherever you are in your career, draw your lifetime timeline and then put your career on it. When did you start real estate? Okay. And now put this change in it. How many years you've been doing it the way you were doing it? And how many years do you plan to stay in this? Like, it's gonna be the future. So you can either fight it and be mad about it, or you can go, let me learn it. Let me figure out how to work with it. And let me look at what my life looks like on the other side of it. Do your math over. Math has changed now.
Yeah.
So you got to do the math over and go, does this work for me? Can I do this? Do I have to sell more? Do I have to do things differently? What needs to change to have success on the other side? Because you have this big, long blank space on the other side of this, especially someone like you.
Yeah.
And does this work? And you're more in control of the next chapter of your life than anybody else. Not who's president, not your spouse, not your kids. If you have kids, you're in control of that. So does it work for you or doesn't it? And if it doesn't, then you need to find something else to do going forward. And if it does, then you need to learn it, do it, and get good at it.
Yeah.
You already took the classes. You already did the course. You already got certified. Like, you're in the space. Are you going to double down and go hard and make this work for you? Or are you going to go, okay, I did this, but as I play out the math and look forward, this doesn't work for me. So I need to rethink my future, And I disagree with, let me do this and then find 5 side hustles and make ends meet. I think you need to craft your future.
Yeah.
So part of that lifetime timeline thinking. So that's that part. We'll go through the whole framework, and then I'll get you to the other. Remind me to do 5-year thinking. So you put in the timeline and look what it looks like for you. And then you isolate it, not how you got here. Not, I wish I'd have chosen another career. Too late. You already did this one. And not, the whole world's going to be ruined on the other side of this. You can't, you don't know that, and you don't know how it's going to change. It is what it is. Sometimes I'll show a big audience like a glass, and it has some water in it. And I'll go, is this half full or half empty? And what would you say?
I'd say half full.
Yeah, because you want it to be.
Yeah.
It's a 6-ounce glass with 3 ounces of water. It just is.
Yeah.
So we have to take all of the emotion out of it, and not just what we want it to be. I want to be the half glass, the glass half full girl. I want to be that person.
Yeah.
But it's just 6-ounce glass with 3 ounces of water. What exactly are we looking at in this moment? And then what can we actually do about it? If we take out the wish I hadn't have done this and the whole world's ruined on the other side of it, and we go, what am I actually dealing with, and what can I do with this? So that's the isolate piece. And then the people piece, listen to podcasts like this, talk to your spouse about what your future career looks like, share those numbers,
Yeah.
pull in your accountant, pull in some other people and pull in people that you work with and go, how are you dealing with this? What's your plan? So you can have a plan. But the people piece is really important. And if you are stressed or need to pull in a therapist to help you get through this moment in time, I'm very pro therapy.
Me too. I
And
think that's something that a lot of people don't do enough of.
yes. Well, and I believe, it's my own thought on this. I think therapy is like dating. Like if you go to a therapist and you
Yeah.
don't like them, don't go back for a second date.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them out there. Find somebody else.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of therapy, but I do believe you have to find somebody who works for you because everybody's different
Yeah.
and what you need is different. I had one at one point in my life and she kept saying, okay, let's get quiet and find your happy place. I was like, I might smack her.
I would have lost it.
I did. I got up and left.
Yeah.
I like by the second time, I'm like, there's no happy place in here. I am like really
It's the reason I'm here.
I'm in a really dark place right now. There's no happy in this brain. So you're not my person. I need someone to tell me what to do so I don't jump off a bridge. That's what I need. Yeah. So I found someone else. So, but that people piece, is there. And then the story is, if you are complaining about this new rule all the time, and if you like, what's the language in your head? How are you talking about this? The words in your head come out of your mouth and become your reality. So how do you talk about it?
For me, at first, I was like, this sucks. This is like, I'm never going to sell another house. I was on a really good streak and I lost it. I recently, how I've changed my viewpoint is, no, this is going to wean out the realtors that, are just doing it, that don't really put a lot of emphasis on it. So I was like, one, it's going to make me hone in my skill of adding that value. And then two, it's going to make it more competitive because there's a ton of great realtors out there and I'm competing on them and I have to prove to other people looking that I'm the realtor that they need to choose, like a therapist.
Yeah.
Like it's finding the right person that fits.
Not everybody's for everybody.
Yeah.
Find your people and use them. And the language that you use to explain that and how you talk about it will become your reality. So that's the story part. So that's how I would say anyone going through this, that you put in your timeline what exactly you're dealing with. Pull in the right people to help and all, and then make sure the language that you're using to talk about it is language that's going to craft your next chapter that you want to get to. If you're the person who, some people are going to get stuck in this moment. They're going to be people who've been in this industry for a while that say, this ruined me. I'm never going to make it on the other side of this. And the ruined and never language will come true because that's how they think. Yeah. So there'll be some people who get stuck in this moment. But if they want to get unstuck, then they need to step back and look at the timeline of their life, isolate it, pull in the right people, and craft that story a little better.
Yeah, I love that. Just because, you remember when you were a kid and you say like a small white lie and you say it long enough. And then when you go back to think what's reality, you're like,
wait, did I really
what is reality? Yeah. That's what I kind of equated it to. Which I think
that's good.
I just literally, it dawned on me because me and my wife, we were talking about it the other day and she's like, you ever remember those times? I'm like, actually, yeah, there was this one thing and I still don't know if it's true or not.
You told the story so many times.
Yeah, I was like, I told it so many times. And
is it a memory or is it a story? Like, where does the line blur?
And I think that's what it really is. Like you tell yourself what it is long enough, like your reality, your thoughts become your reality.
100%.
Like, and I think people
100%.
don't really give their brain the right respect of how much power it actually has.
Yeah.
And you're in control of it.
There's this great book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and I talk about it a lot from the stage. It's one of my favorite books. It's a really heavy read, so do you do Blinkist?
Yeah.
Oh, I can blink anything.
Yeah.
Pull it up on Blinkist in 25 minutes, you'll get it. But it's a whole thing on our behaviors and how our body reacts. So, for example, a zebra runs across, is being chased by a lion, and it runs across, the savannah. And then it outruns the lion because it's made for that.
Yeah.
And then it hides in the bushes and the tall grass where it's supposed to be. And its heart rate goes down. And it's like all that cortisol and norepinephrine, focus and the stress hormones and the sugar, like all the things that it needed to survive, go back to level set because it's a zebra. Now, our humans, our brains are worried about the tiger all the time and constantly having those, that adrenaline. Like we can think about something and our heart rate will go up.
Yeah.
You know?
You're in anxiety,
Yeah.
depression all
Yeah,
day.
exactly. Like you can think about something, your heart rate will go up. You can get super stressed. You can kind of feel that sugar rush,
Yeah.
cortisol, like all that, any women listening in their 50s, you know what I'm talking about, like all that stress belly fat. It is it's your body reacting. So we are causing our brains, because we've evolved to the point where we can imagine things that aren't real, that are critical, like imagining your bank account being empty, or imagining things being bad, or imagining horrible things that could happen in the future. That can scare us and causes that stress release, that stress hormone. And the animal kingdom doesn't do it. They just go back to level set, and they don't have all those chemicals being released in their body all the time.
Yeah, which I think that's I'm going to take this back to the podcast and like the audience here. Like the reason it took me so long to get into real estate and start this podcast is because I was playing the what if game. Yeah. Well, what if no one likes it? Well, what if no one watches it? Well, what if no one does this? What if I never sell a house like ever? And I played that for the longest of time. And from the seat that I'm sitting in and from the conversations I've had with my wife learning I'm more of a risk taker than she is. She likes the safeness. She doesn't like risk. Me, after I jumped off the cliff, I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. So now she has to bring me back to reality a lot of times. But, a lot of people have these great ideas and great ambitions and the ability to create an empire, but they never do it because they play the what if game. So I really resonate with that, because this leading along with what I was saying, Denzel Washington has a quote. I don't know if he coined it or he read it from somewhere, but it was the biggest like shock to my reality. And he was, the richest place in the world is the grave, because that's where dreams go to die. And I said, holy crap. And then it started this whole thinking, like, I never want to be on my deathbed saying, I wish I would have.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and do everything. And playing the risk game, which is why I love your framework, because it's eliminating the what ifs.
You reverse engineer your eulogy.
Yeah.
Like you decide who you're going to be and do as you go forward. Like one of the things I talk with people about a lot is what is this going to feel like and be in 5 years? Whether they're going through a really difficult time, or whether they're just struggling with trying to decide what to do with their life. So in some instances, people are like, well, I'm never going to be successful. I'm like, what does success look like to you? It looks different for all of us.
Yeah.
Like, and also, what does success look like? The word success, like in your head, you're picturing the car, or the boat, or the house, or the thing. What does a successful lifetime look like? That's a very different vibe.
Yeah.
Right?
Very different.
It's a very, like, oh, he's successful, or he's had a successful lifetime. Very different vibe. So what are you aiming for? What are you working towards? Like 5 years, I'll tell people, if you're 5 years from now, do you want to be in an office with people, or do you don't want to be in an office? Do you want to work alone? Do you want to be in the city, out in the country? Do you want to live at the beach, in the mountains? When you're working, is there a window nearby? Like, and who are you working and talking to? Like, what does it look and feel like?
Yeah.
Unless you know kind of what that, what you want, you'll never get there, because you'll just kind of wander around and take what comes. But if you have an idea of, oh, I think this is what would feel really good, you'll start making choices that take you in that direction.
Yeah.
So that's the 5 years from now. That's when they're searching. Now, for people who've been through a big trauma or gone through something that they feel like they just can't go on, and they have those really dark moments, like they're, don't want their timeline to keep going. And I was in that space at 37. I was very much wanted to check out. So I went through a very dark time. That's what my first book references that. But I work with those folks, and my best example is my son came home from college, and a buddy of his came home with him, and he had made a total ass of himself at a party, gotten super trashed, fell down the steps, like they were like frat party, like cement steps, and he like cut up his face, and he knocked out a tooth.
Oh,
he was in bad shape, and this sweet sandy haired boy. And so they come home from college, and he comes home with him, and he's like, hey, Miss Nina. And I was like, hey. And he said, can I talk with you? Because everybody comes to Nina for advice. Yeah. It's like, sure, I got you, babe. So we went and sat on the end of the dock, and talked for a little bit. And I said, "How you doing?" And he said, "I've just ruined my whole life." He said, I haven't gone back to class because I'm too embarrassed to even see my friends. And I haven't told my parents because they're going to kill me,
Yeah.
and I'm failing everything because I haven't been back to class. I've just ruined my whole life in one night." And I said to him, "Okay, let's just switch gears for a minute. Didn't you say you wanted to get a dog someday when you grew up?" And he's looking at me like, "Are you crazy?" Sitting across me from the end of that. And I was like, "Just play with me here." I said, "Didn't you say you wanted to get a dog someday when you grew up?" And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, "Okay, well, what kind of dog would you get?" And he said, "I think I want to get a lab, like a black lab." I'm like, "So cool. I love labs. What would you name it?" He said, "Like a people name, like Eric." And I was like, "I love that." And I looked at him and I said, "When you and Eric are running down the beach in 5 years,
Mhm.
5 years from now, when you and Eric are running down the beach over on Isle of Palms, it is not going to feel like this. This is going to be a story you tell about how you screwed up and had to figure your way out of it. It is not going to feel like this. It's going to be a story you tell. So let's figure out what that's going to look like." And he just sat there and you could see his whole body change. Like, oh yeah, I do get to actually grow up and do other things. Like it was just like his whole body language changed. And we sat
It's like
there.
a weight lifted off the shoulder.
Yeah, just very different. And I was like, you're going to be 5 years from now, you're going to have a dog and who knows what the rest of your life's going to look like.
Yeah.
But you're going to have a dog and you're going to run down the beach and you're going to be you and Eric's going to be Eric.
Yeah.
And this will be a story that you tell. So let's figure out what story it's going to be. Let's get the words right. So we did. We put it in the timeline. I said, "Look at all this blank space ahead. I said, you're going to screw up so many more times in the future.
Yeah.
This is just the first big screw up." I said, "There'll be more."
There'll be plenty.
I'm glad I lived through mine.
Yeah.
I made many poor choices. I said, "So this is just the first, and it's in your timeline." And I said, it's not ruined. Like you can't go back and undo it. And your life isn't horrible. What do you need to do right now? I'm like, "You need to get back to class. You need to tell your parents and all those things." And that was the I part, the isolate. And then I said, "Let's figure out your people. Okay, some of your friends are not friends because they let you get, like, you need to have a conversation with them and go, you are not helping."
Yeah.
And you need to also thank the ones that helped you out. And you need to make a phone call to them. Like, "We're going to do it now." And go, "Thanks for helping me out." I said, and then let's write down a script and call your teachers and go, "I seriously screwed up and I'm super embarrassed and I think I'm failing. And will you help me?" And he called all of his teachers and they all were like, "Sure, of course." No, what teachers not? They're like, "Sure, we'll get you there. We'll get you there." He just called and said, "I seriously screwed up. I think I'm failing. And will you help me?" They all helped. And then called his parents. We worked on a script for that too. And and of course they helped him too.
Yeah.
Their parents. And a matter of, a day or so of making the phone calls and coming up with a plan, he was back on track again.
Yeah.
But he seriously was in such a bad spot. He thought his life was over. Like he was dark really fast. And I thought, it's so easy for us to get there.
So easy.
It feels like everything in the moment. But however you feel right now, you're not going to feel the same way 2 hours from now or 2 weeks from now, certainly not 2 years from now. And your emotions change and the weight of things change so much.
Yeah. And I can tell you, like, never met the dude, don't even know the full story, but I guarantee you all the what ifs that he was playing in his head probably never ever happened.
No.
And that's what it's like, it's like I changed my what if to what if I never do it?
Yeah.
Like, what if I never did real estate? Like, how would I feel? Like, I'd feel awful. I wouldn't realize that this is where I'm supposed to be, and it's giving me the freedom to do this podcast and all these other things that I enjoy doing. But I would have never experienced it if I jumped off the cliff. Has it been hard? Yes.
Right. It's
like,
not easy. Life is never gonna, if you're waiting for life to get easy, it doesn't.
You're going to be there for a long time.
It doesn't, unless you're just perfectly happy with exactly how your life is now and you never want any more or to learn anything new. Like, you're going to challenge yourself to learn new things. You're going to try new things. Like, there's going to be new challenges and new stuff out there. Here's a what if for you.
Ooh.
What if it all works out?
I love that one. Yeah.
What if it all works out?
Like, what if your dreams come true?
Yeah.
That's what I started telling myself. It's like, all right, I'm doing real estate. Like I said, there's plan A and that's it. There's no plan B. There's nothing. It's either success or fail. And I said, I'm succeeding. I don't care what happens. I'm succeeding. Like I can't, because I had no other, my wife got a full-time job and she was carrying the weight, which for me, as the person that I am, like I love to provide. Like I always wanted to be that. And then I lost my identity. Like I was the provider. I brought in the money. I bought the house. I bought the ring. I did all this stuff. And so that was my identity. And then I lost it all. And my wife is providing for me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is humiliating. And then I was like, no.
Or you could just be in a good partnership.
Yeah. And it forced me to learn.
To be in a good partnership. Where you can help each other.
And it forced me to learn that. And it forced me to learn that it's like okay to be, provide. Because I'm like you. I hate asking for help. I hate it. Like it makes me want to cry. Yeah. Like me
too. And I've been doing it my whole life. So that's not going anywhere either.
I don't know what it is.
You got to get better at it.
It's and so like I've forced myself to kind of get into that level. But one of the things that's kind of hit me a lot, and what a lot of you are saying, is like success in business really comes down to how quick you can adapt and change.
Right.
100%. And you mentioned Lego, which I'm obsessed with Lego. I didn't know the whole like case. I'm obsessed with case studies as well, and like how people shift and all that stuff. So I want to talk about that because I'm also like, I'm obsessed with Disney. Like I love watching, not only like I was just in Disney literally this weekend. So this is why it kind of hits. Not only am I obsessed with the park itself, but the whole framework of the business. Mm-hmm. So like anytime I'm looking at like a company, I want to know the business. Like I want to know the inner workings. I want to know the structure. I want to know how they adapt, how they change. So like that's what I've noticed just from you talking. And I think what your framework does is literally says, okay, let's just cut the BS, stop playing the what if. Let's base it off facts. Yeah. And like with Lego, the fact they were going bankrupt, they needed to do something. Yeah. So what's the quickest way they can get money? Let's do a movie.
Yeah. Well, first they were wooden blocks.
Yeah.
And then the factory burned down. And
Interesting.
They had just started playing with plastics. The factory burns down. They're like, well, we got enough to rebuild, but we can only rebuild wood or plastic. They're like, let's go all in on plastic. Yeah. And they did plastic bricks. And then they started building sets of things. And then they built Legolands. That was actually the next thing. And then those things made them bankrupt. And then they had to find a way forward. I think next was partnerships. So they did the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah. Remember they did Star Wars partnerships. I still have like Millennium Falcon and other things put together. Yeah, my middle son put them together, and they're still not allowed to be taken apart.
Oh yeah, I still have mine up in a box in the attic.
Exactly. The Crackle, is that what it is? Like, did you watch? Yeah, the Disney movie. I mean, the Lego movie. Anyway, so they did that, and then they were struggling again, and then they came up with that after the partnerships and stuff, because they did those and then still were not quite successful as they could have been, or they expanded too big. I don't remember where they were at that moment, but that's when they did the first Lego movie. And that first movie made $640 million and took them. So then they made more, the Batman Lego movie, Don't Skip Leg Day, and then all the, I love all those movies.
I love freaking those.
You guys remember like Everything is Awesome. That's the first one. Yeah. Anyway, I won't sing. But those were so good, and those became a big winner for them. And then from there, they went to the VR experiences. And from there, they did, I don't know, other things. And then just this January, that's when I really picked up on this concept with them, as they once again adapted with the world adapting. And they have this AI toolkit that they're putting in the schools across the nation.
I love that. Because, I mean, I think everybody sees Lego, they see Disney, they see, the titles that most people carry with themselves, and they see the success. Yeah. Which is why I love your framework, where in your speaking, is you're not shy to talk about the failures, which I love, because I think people need to lean more into the failures, because the failure is more valuable than the success. Because without the failure, you don't have the success. Like, it's just a stepping block. Like, so Lego, they wouldn't be where they're at if they didn't fail. Because, I mean, if they created Legoland and everything was, gung ho, they wouldn't adapt. They would just be like, oh, we're just going to keep doing the same old thing.
They were forced to think outside the box and come in with new things.
And I think, like with real estate, with business, and like with this, with the NAR, like for me, it's just another way to adapt. Like things are going to change. Like now I have to frame a way of how I'm going to ask people to pay me and not be afraid of it. Like for someone that's hates asking for help,
for money,
I have to ask for money. Yeah. And I'm like, God, this sucks.
It feels uncomfortable.
So, but it's like, all right, it is what it is.
You'll come up with a script, and you'll come up with a way to do it that feels good to you.
Yeah. So like now I've gone and created booklets, and I've created a welcome package, and I've realized that I want to create real estate more like a consulting gig rather than a transaction. Like, all right, let's sit down, let's talk about your dreams, your goals, your ambitions, and let's put it in play. So that's why I love this thing, because the whole tips, your framework of it is kind of how I didn't have a analogy attached to it, but it's how I wanted to talk with people looking to buy, because there's a lot of what ifs. The big what if, when we were actually recording a podcast here earlier, was what do you do when the presidential election is the same time when you want to buy? But it's like, okay, let's base it off the facts. Homes are going to be cheaper now. Interest rates are cheaper now, or the lowest they've ever been. So that's the fact. We can play the what if game all day long,
or we can go ahead and take action.
Yes.
And with what we know, with a known commodity, and that's less risk.
Yeah.
So it's your risk aversion. That's your level of risk. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So I really love that, because I mean it's being able, and that's why I have learned to adapt with the change of the NAR, because I'm like, stop seeing it as a negative thing. It's a hurdle, but also hurdles you can jump over.
Right.
But you can't I'm as obsessed with analogies. I use them all the time.
Yeah.
And especially I feel like you can relate to this, because I played football and I was big into soccer. So I understand the sports analogy, but with track and field, doing hurdles. Like if I go out today and try to jump over a hurdle, I'm going to fall flat on my face. But I would never know that I need to learn how to jump over a hurdle if I never tried.
Right.
So it's like, all right, with this whole NAR thing, it's like, all right, well, I didn't realize I needed to work on my presentation with my clients and present my value in a proper way if this NAR thing never happened.
Right. Well, I call the concept around that, when you talked about, what the things that you learn from, I call it your reverse resume. So same thing with your timeline that we talked about.
Yeah.
So you put all your accolades up top, like I have mine, and then below that line, because you can put your, stretches of time for careers and things.
Mm-hmm.
And below that line, I say, this is your reverse resume. Put down there all the things you've overcome.
Mm.
Everything from you got bullied in high school, or you had lost a parent, or you had a speech impediment, or whatever it is that, you lost a job, you got fired, you got divorced, all this stuff. That all goes on the bottom of the resume. And I call that your reverse resume. And I believe that's what makes you who you are.
Yeah.
Much more so than the stuff above the line. How you got through those, the way in which you got through those, and the fact that you got through those, that's what makes you stronger. Every time you work your way back up over that line, you're more resilient. You're a little stronger. So that's thinking around. It's not just one or two things too, and they're not going to stop happening. So give yourself a little credit for getting through them, and know that next time something comes, you can get through that too. And you'll use some of the same things you learned along the way. Yeah.
I love that, because I mean, with me losing my job and all the changes that I've experienced in the past year and a half or so, I was like, no, I need to really cherish my failures, because before I was always trying to hide them under the rug, because I was like, I don't want people to see my failures, all this. But I'm like, no, that's what makes me me. That's what made me into doing this. That's what made me lean into risk more, is because I failed.
I quit my corporate job making a lot of money, and decided to write my first book and get into speaking. And I launched it all in 2020.
Gosh.
I had a full calendar of conference speaking lined up, and then the whole conference world shut down. And I was like, wow.
So you left the corporate world and had literally everything lined up in 2020, correct?
Yeah. So wonderful timing.
Yeah.
All the corporate speaking, big conferences, a whole slate of those lined up for 2020. And then COVID, and they all went away. And what I didn't know is, because it's new business, learning and growing, continue to learn and grow. I didn't realize that when you're paid to speak, they give you half up front.
Yeah.
And then they give you half upon, when you speak, because you get booked like 4 or 5 months in advance.
Yeah.
Or sometimes a year in advance. So we had booked up my calendar, and we had gotten all of that money, and then we had spent it to do advertising and build our company. And then COVID hit, and then we had to give it back because I didn't have my contracts written correctly. So I was so screwed. And I was like, so I had to sell some stock and invest in my own company again.
But how'd you adapt? I mean, you need to adapt extremely quick for that. How?
Well, there was it's different at some point in your life. So at this point in my life, my house is paid for, my car's paid
Yeah.
for, my kids' colleges are paid for. Life is, I have the ability, because I have done many jobs and had some success, to not have to have this make a bunch of money at once.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like I had a ton of bills, but I didn't want a failing business. So I, you know, at first, like everybody, I was in that state of denial. We're all just going to wear a mask and be back in a few
Yeah.
months. So
Oh,
it
God.
didn't happen
Yeah.
overnight. You know, I went through all the stages of grief, I call it.
2
you
years
know,
later, you're
denial.
like, we're still doing this.
Yeah. So about 6 months in, it was reality set
Yeah.
in. And I was like, okay, this is a long haul. So my partner, who was doing this with me, who's one of my best friends,
Yeah.
she had a real estate license. And I said, here's what we're going to do. And this is a great story for your podcast. Now
Love
that
it.
you mentioned it. So I said, here's what we're going to do. I said, we were planning to sell this house in a few years anyway. We had a big house on the water in Mount
Mhm.
Pleasant, 4,000 square feet, just
Oh,
the two
yeah.
of us. Kids had all left for college. Was my dream home at one point,
Mhm.
but it seemed really big for two people and
Yeah.
didn't need to be there. So I said, here's what we're going to do. You're going to update your real estate license. I said, you're going to sell my house and you're going to take your full commission of it.
Yeah.
And that'll hold you over for a while. It's a big ass house.
Yeah.
I said, that'll hold us for a little bit. I'm going to furlough you and you're going to do this on the side. So that means I can bring her back.
Yeah.
So I can get a little bit of government assistance if I'm going to bring her back. I said, so I'm going to furlough you. You're going to get your real estate license. You're going to sell my house. Help me find something else. And so we did all that. And then I also worked in the meantime, I worked and stood up an online class that I was
Okay.
doing. So I was worked with a lot of authors
Mhm.
because I'd written my first book, and other authors were coming to me going, how do I take my book and make it into a keynote speech? Like, you can't read your whole book from the stage.
Yeah.
How do I choose what to talk about? Because you get an hour,
Yeah.
if that. So I had been working with other writers to do that. And so I made that into a course. So people could buy that. I would take them through a course, and I had about 10, 12 people every 2 or 3 months that would log on for this and take them through taking their book from the book to the stage.
Mm.
And so I did that. That was a little bit of side hustle income. Also taught me a lot about how to do an online course,
Yeah.
which helped because I'm getting ready to do another one. And then I also, got a house that I wrote a check for.
Nice.
So sold the big house. She got a big commission. I wrote a check and bought a house. I'm in Park Circle.
Yeah.
For those
Oh.
for this people who are watching this in the Charleston area.
Good
who know.
spot.
Yeah. So my kids are all grown and gone and elsewhere. So I'm like, let's do this thing. Let's just sped up our timeline on when we were going to do that. We were probably 3 years out from wanting to sell that house and
Mhm.
move. But it just sped up my timeline. So that's how I got through it. I found a new path forward.
Hmm.
Uh,
Which you adapted. And I think the theme of this podcast is learning to adapt with the changes of life. And, your big theme, which I absolutely love, because if you're in business, even if you're everyday life there, if you haven't got punched in the face, you haven't been living long enough. And I think it's such a skill that is missed.
I was going to say the definition of resilience, and people kind of mix it in with persistence and grit. It's very different.
Mm-hmm.
So persistence is go hard,
Yeah.
double down, go hard every day, keep going, have a plan, stick to it. Grit is when it gets really hard, don't give up.
Yeah.
For any, don't let anything stand in your way. Resilience is adapt. Resilience is adapt in a positive way. So the best example I have is in 2020. When we all woke up January 1st, 2020, we had that was the year, we had our goals for the year, our New Year's resolutions. This is the year I was going to lose the weight, get my finances in order, fix these relationships, whatever, take the vacation. We all had our stuff. And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And grit and persistence were not going to get you through that year.
No.
You had to be resilient. You had to adapt. The definition of resilience is your ability to learn, grow stronger, and adapt in a positive way to whatever happens in your life. And the adapt piece is really key. That's what I lean into. And what I say when I talk to folks, it's your ability to adapt in a positive way to this, whatever this is. And this could be traffic. Don't let it ruin your day. This could be something big like, a divorce or losing your job or some big life-changing thing too. Your ability to adapt in a positive way to this. So that concept of resilience.
Yeah, which I think you just listed off the 3 key characteristics that I think you need for business. Is the adaptability, I think, is probably the most prominent, the grit, and gosh, what was the other?
Persistence.
Persistence.
Yeah.
If you don't have those three, don't start your own business.
Right. Well, and many times grit and persistence can get you there, but without resilience, when anything goes wrong, you have to adapt. You have to make a change.
Yeah.
People who have successful lifetimes have that. You might have with some grit and persistence, you may have some success. You may get the thing and have the one-time win, but you have to be resilient to have continuous wins over and over.
Yeah. And I think 90% of realtors, entrepreneurs miss the adaptability. They have the grit, they have the persistence. And that's why you see the success rate of realtors, or the fail rate, I should say, is 95% realtors will fail within their first year, because they have the grind. They're willing to, put their head down and grind and be persistent with it. But at the same time, they don't adapt. And I think that's a huge, revelation that I'm experiencing right now. Is like, because you see it, like you see it with entrepreneurs. Like entrepreneurs are known for just jumping to the next thing, because they don't know how to adapt. They have the grit, they have the persistence, they do it, they get successful, and then bam, the well dries up, and they're like, oh crap. And then they
next shiny object, next shiny thing.
Then they're a photographer, and you're like, dude, I didn't even know you liked photography. So I think that is huge, because I also believe, like, to really be successful is have grit, have persistence, but also like not giving up. And I know grit's like being able to be disciplined and driving forward, but not giving up in the sense of when times get hard, not being able to shift your focus and say, all right, I love podcasts, but maybe this is not working out. How can I shift this to still do podcasting, but make it successful? How can I shift with the times? So literally everybody has a podcast now.
Yeah.
And it's like, one, I do this for me, but I also do it for y'all, to be able to participate in that. But it's like, all right, how can I do what's necessary? And so it's like, I have the grit, I have the persistence. Now it's like, all right, now I'm in it.
Mm-hmm.
I've applied it. Where's the adaptation? So like, that's where my niche has changed. Like, I'm no longer shooting niche, everyone. Now I'm focusing more on realtors. So it's like that adaptation. And I don't think a lot of people have that.
Yeah. And and one of the things that piles into that, and I'm sure you've probably talked about it on here before, is skill stacking. So what do you have skills at? And that can be everything from, you were an athlete. I had a guy who worked with me in tech in software, Benefit Focus, software as a service, big SaaS company. But he had been a football coach, and he also had a couple, he knew how to code a little bit. He'd been a football coach. He came in as part of the marketing sales team. And I was like, what you're really good? Like, you can stand up there and I said, you just can get in front of a whiteboard, and just like you're in front of a whole team working a play, you can this is how you use software, and it goes in here and it does that and it matches it up. And I was like, that's your superpower.
Yeah.
So skill stacking all the different things that you're good at could be something very different than what you're thinking.
Yeah.
So say you are good at art, and you're also good at computers, and you also love fashion. I mean, you could do digital fashion photography. You stack it all up at whatever makes sense to you.
Yeah.
For me, I was good at communication. I was really good at taking very complex, big issues and breaking them down, because I was a journalist.
Yeah.
Here's a big complex thing. I get 30 seconds to explain it to you. That's what I was good at.
I
was good at interviewing people and talking to people. And those pieces translated into the different roles that I've had. When I worked in communications and tech, I used those skills. When I wrote my book, I use those skills. When I do keynote speeches now, I use those same skills.
I love that. Yeah.
And my athleticism, that's my stack.
Yeah. Skill stacking, I think, is a lost art lately. People are just trying to chase the dollar. And I think that's the biggest miss. It's like, if you want to chase the dollar, find your skill, hone into that, and lean into that, and figure out how it benefits everybody else, and be able to articulate that.
Yeah.
Which is what real estate with this whole change has taught me. It's like, all right, what are my skills? I'm determined. Like, if my client wants this house, I will go knock every single door until he gets that floor plan.
Yeah.
Like, determination. So like, that's what I communicate to my clients. I'm not for everybody, and not being butthurt when they say, oh, I don't really need you as my client, I'm going next door.
Okay.
And it's like, great. Let me find someone that I really enjoy. And that really,
well, some clients are easier than others. Some are friggin' nightmares.
Yes. And like, I always tell people, like, I love cold calling. I don't know why.
You're very strange.
I am. I am. Like, I will sit there and I do.
No one likes cold
No,
calls.
no one does. And I don't know why I do. Because I just like to have conversations and I meet really cool people randomly. And so like on average, I try to set my goal and make 290 calls a week with real estate. So that's my goal. And I'll sit there and I'll do it all day long. And I always tell people, I'm like, every no is a closer, get you closer to your next yes. And your next yes is typically going to be the person that really resonates with you and that sees your worth.
Right.
So like, if you're like, that's why I tell people I'm not a salesman. Like I don't sell. Like, I'm not trying to convince you to go with me. Like, I would rather you tell me no, because that just means I've saved you time and I've saved me time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be happier finding the next realtor that you resonate more with.
And those are going to be the people who don't play nice with these new rules.
Yeah.
You don't want them anyway.
No.
They don't really want to work with
like
you.
They
don't appreciate you.
Well, I had it the other day. I called someone. I told them the whole spiel. I'm like, hey, listen, you have to sign this contract. I charge you 3%. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And they were like, oh, I'm not paying you 3%. I'm like, that's fine. I was like, I'll be more than happy to refer you to someone. I was like, referred you, talk with the agent. I was like, I just want 35% of whatever you make. And I was like, I still got paid from it. But he doesn't feel like he's pressured into anything. So it's being able to adapt with the change and have that, which I love your viewpoint, your stance on that. And I think it's really valuable. So as we're winding down, I always like to kind of end on this. Sometimes I'm, consistent with it, sometimes not. But I always ask people, to the young real estate agent that just started trying to figure everything out, has all this change, or to even the young entrepreneur that's just trying to get started, what advice do you have to them?
Two things. And I don't know real estate like you do.
Yeah.
It's not my wheelhouse. But in any instance, don't go it alone. People who have big success, athletes have coaches, people have mentors, CEOs call each other and say, how are you getting through things? Don't go it alone. So if you are trying to do something new and you think you have a great idea, pull in other people, let them bounce some ideas off of it, but don't go it alone. And the other thing is, success happens on its own time. So it's okay to not be okay. Like I said, and it's not okay to stay that way. Sometimes things take a lot longer than you think. And especially your generation, younger people, they're like, feel like it should happen really quickly. I have my own kids. They're like in their careers and they feel like things should happen really fast. I'm like, you are 6 months away from stepping in there and even asking for this raise. Don't step into that room yet.
Yeah.
Or you're a year or so away from wanting to make that change because you have got, and I know, I'm like, you've got all this to learn. Have you thought about this, and this, and who's mentoring you and who in this space can help you get there? Like, don't jump too fast. So that would be my biggest thing is it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to be all the way there yet. Life is long. It is an adventure. They say, okay, I just made a post about this today. Life is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
People always say that. So, like, enjoy the journey. Life is a journey. Yeah. Success is a journey. You have to enjoy the journey along the way. Success is a journey. I change it to success is an adventure because a journey, the definition is an effort to get from point A to point B. But an adventure is a time with obstacles and threats and can be treacherous. Like life, treat your success like it's an adventure, and you don't go on an adventure by yourself. Pull in some other people and look at success as an adventure.
It's the car ride with all your friends in college.
Yeah.
And it's like the tire blows along the way. Then the transmission blows along the way. And it's miserable when you're in it. You're freaking out. But at the end of it, you'll all laugh about it because you made it to the destination.
Right. And it's who you're in there with. Who's riding shotgun? Like who's picking the tunes and what snacks are you bringing? Like that's life. That's the journey. So if you look at success as an adventure, and not just some trot along journey like Lord of the Rings and they're walking. You have to look at it more of an adventure and enjoy like all the screw ups because those become the stories you tell.
Yeah. No one really everybody talks about like the success and the initial like conversation like we did. Like we lead with that normally, but really the true conversation is in the nitty gritty failures and the struggles and the journey and the adventure and all that stuff. It's just like, okay, we know your title, but like, how'd you get there? Like that's where the real conversation is. And I think that's what matters. And that's what I really love about your framework of everything. So also as we're wrapping up, where can they, these listeners follow you or kind of find you?
Sure. So I'm on social media everywhere. I'm just starting some new things on TikTok. I'm trying not to be super uncool, so you can see me there. But I do a lot and I have a very young team. They keep pushing me into it, so it'll be entertaining. And I am on Instagram, and I do a daily motivation on Instagram, which is kind of a fun place to follow me. If business-wise, you can follow me on LinkedIn for business information and the ways in which I'm working. If you have a company you want me to speak to and stuff, you find me through LinkedIn or through my website.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then I'll get with you. I'd like to attach a link to your book down below. I think it'd really be good for a lot of listeners here.
Absolutely. I actually brought you one, so I'll give it to you.
I'm obsessed with books.
There you go.
It'll be my next read next month, but I appreciate it. Well, Nina, thank you so much. Passion Seekers, I really appreciate y'all tuning in. Catch y'all on the next one. Later.